So as usual, it's been a minute since I've done a story. My windows are open because it's warm, so there might be a fair amount of background noise today. Just warning you because I have to have the windows open to hear the kids outside. So go ahead and listen, enjoy, and I hope it doesn't get too loud and crazy in here. Just outside of Brookings, Oregon, sits the Thomascreekbridge, which is the tallest bridge in the entire state. It sits 345 feet high and just over a valley that leads out to the Pacific Ocean. There are trails at both ends of the bridge that lead down to the beach, and during the summer months, the turnouts at the trailheads are packed full of cars, and the trails are full of hikers enjoying the beautiful terrain down to the sandy beaches. This bridge that provides beautiful views of valleys, forests, and the ocean also provides a darkness. In this country, we have an epidemic of depression that leads many individuals to feel helpless in life, and sometimes their answer is to end their feelings of pain and helplessness. In the U.S., someone commits suicide every minute. The national average is 13 per 100,000, and in the state of Oregon, that number is even higher. Given the height of the Thomascreekbridge, it's a legitimate concern that those who visit this area may not be doing so just to take in the beautiful views or hike the trails, but to end their life. It has been requested to put up signage at both ends of the bridge for suicide prevention information and 24-hour hotline numbers, but as it is now, there's just a very small sign at both ends that read "No jumping or diving from the bridge." One summer day, a grandfather, his grandson, and the exchange student that they were hosting were hiking the trails to the north of Thomascreekbridge, geolocating treasure. It was later in the day and getting cold out, so the trio decided to head back up to the trailhead. This time of year, it doesn't get dark until about 10 p.m., so they had plenty of time to make it back before dark. As they started their ascent up the trail to the parking area, they noticed some clothing in the brush a bit off trail. Curiosity had struck them, and they headed over to see if it may be a jacket someone had lost or left behind, and they could take it up so it could easily be retrieved if the owner came back for it. That was not necessary, though, as once they got closer, they could see the owner of the jacket was still inside of it. Upon closer inspection, the hikers quickly realized it was an obviously deceased body, and having zero cell phone reception, they had to make their way back up the trail, then into town to alert the authorities. Once the call to 911 connected, they told dispatch that they had been out hiking and came across the body of an obviously deceased woman at the base of the Thomascreekbridge. The Curry County sheriffs headed out immediately, and they knew they wouldn't be able to transport the body on the trail, so they called the search and rescue, who has equipment to properly recover people or bodies in rougher terrains. After the sheriff deputies reached the body, they quickly realized that it was the body of a woman who had been missing for about a week just over the border in Crescent City, California. Michelle Dixon was a young waitress who was working 2 jobs to put herself through college. Her goal was to become an attorney, which is a little ironic considering she was supplementing her income with a 3rd job as a weed dealer. Now, this was back in 2008, so marijuana was not legal recreationally in California or Oregon at the time, and Michelle was not a large-scale dealer. She was not on the radar of any police, and her family had no idea she was selling weed. Her boyfriend, however, seemed to be well aware of her side hustle and always made sure to reiterate that, quote, she was not a big-time drug dealer, she was just supplementing her bills. Before Michelle's body had been found in Oregon, there was already a massive search being conducted for her in California. Her car had been found a week earlier on the beach in Crescent City, California, and it was on fire. Authorities were called out to the car fire, and they determined that there was no body inside or any sign of Michelle. It was also determined after the fire department investigated that accelerants had been used, and they were ruling it as arson and not the result of an accident or an issue with the car. No one had seen or heard from Michelle, and she was listed as a missing person. In Arcata, California, about 2 hours south of Crescent City in Humboldt County, a young man was acting very strange according to his roommate. And knowing that Michelle was his roommate's friend, he chalked it up to the fact that his roommate's friend was missing. But once he heard the news that Michelle had been found dead, he called the police. Michelle's autopsy revealed that she had not jumped or fallen from the Thomascreekbridge, she had been murdered. Michelle had multiple stab wounds and had died as a result of these injuries. She was found with clothing on and did not appear to be a victim of sexual assault. Her vehicle was likely the primary crime scene and set on fire to conceal evidence. Everyone was baffled and had no idea why this happened to Michelle. She was well-liked, responsible, and in a healthy relationship. It really just didn't make sense. Every murder investigation always looks at the significant other as a suspect, and this one was not any different. When Michelle's boyfriend was in the hot seat, he immediately sang like a canary about her side hustle, and this shifted the focus of the investigation to her customers and other dealers. In Crescent City, about 1/3 of the population is below poverty, and the median annual income is only $30,000 a year. Michelle was doing whatever it took to beat the odds and not become another Crescent City statistic, according to her boyfriend. But Michelle did become a statistic, just not in that way. If Michelle's boyfriend didn't kill her and everyone loved her, why was she dead? The call that came into the tip line provided some answers after a man called in about his roommate acting strange, and this roommate just happened to be Josiah Miller. Miller was a known associate of Michelle and was said to be part of her inner circle. If he was Michelle's close friend, then why the odd behavior? Was he just worried and grieving his friend? The behavior that Miller's roommate had explained to the tip line was that Josiah was Michelle's close friend and he seemed to be very anxious and paranoid. He was doing things that he did not normally do, like clean his car, and what struck him as really odd is that Miller was cutting pieces of the material out of the seats in his truck instead of getting a seat cover or just having it professionally detailed. This information interested the investigators, and they asked Josiah Miller to come down to the station to talk with them. Miller let them know that he did meet with Michelle the night before her car was found in flames to buy a larger sum of marijuana. Miller just happened to be spotted on surveillance at a gas station buying gas about 30 minutes before Michelle's car was found engulfed in flames on the beach. With the timeline that the investigators had come up with, it pointed towards Miller's drug deal with Michelle being her last known interaction, and Miller likely being the last person to see her alive. After questioning Miller, they searched his trunk and performed forensic testing, which determined the presence of blood. The evidence against Miller was only circumstantial. There was no smoking gun or knife in this case, but the DA seemed to want a quick win, so they brought charges against Miller for the murder of Michelle. Instead of taking his chances at trial for the murder of Michelle, who was the small town's American sweetheart, he took a plea deal that reduced his charges to manslaughter and abuse of a corpse. The corpse abuse charge was largely due to the fact that Michelle was murdered, stuffed in her own trunk, then driven 30 minutes away and propelled over the Thomascreekbridge, where she was found by a grandfather and a couple of kids a week later. However, Miller's attorney had the abuse charges dropped, and Miller was sentenced to 11 years in prison with time served, as it took 828 days for his trial to take place. Miller served 7 years in prison and was released in 2017. Nothing is known about him. He keeps a very low profile these days. Miller never gave a reason for taking Michelle's life, but he was meeting her to buy just shy of $1,000 worth of marijuana from her and was said to have no money. He could have been trading her instead of paying her cash, or she could have been fronting him the weed. This is when a dealer gives the drugs out and then the individual has a certain amount of time to pay them back. Maybe it was a robbery gone wrong, and though they were friends, the drugs were more important and Miller killed Michelle for some weed. But this seems very unlikely, and there's another more plausible scenario that Josiah was actually just the middleman connecting a friend with Michelle who wanted to rob Michelle and kill her. Some who were close to Michelle believed the very person who turned the investigation to Josiah initially is involved, and Josiah knew he had to take the fall or else. It seems likely that Josiah was scared or threatened to take the blame, or he was protecting someone and took the fall in their place. Regardless, Josiah Miller was in some way involved and ended up taking 100% responsibility for the murder of his friend Michelle Dixon. A common statement that was made after Michelle was outed as a weed dealer is that she wasn't a big-time drug dealer. In the drug dealing world, the consequences are all the same, and it would appear that even though Michelle wasn't a big time dealer, she didn't need to be for it to kill her. And that's going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing the story as much as I enjoyed telling it. If you haven't already and you did enjoy the story, like, love, and make sure to check out the previous stories I have posted. Also, if you enjoyed this story or any others I have, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a future installment. Feel free to share with anyone who enjoys less than well-known dark reality stories, and leave a comment or let me know if there are any stories that you would personally like me to research and cover.